this morning is we're going to split it into two blocks. We're going to talk about the economy, obviously, and we'll be doing that with Tamas and calling very heavily on his expertise in that. And I will come to you shortly, Tamas. But we're going to start with you, Barbara, as you're making your debut. We can get that over and done with as quickly as possible for you. And we're going to talk about energy and more specifically about renewables and the overview of where we are in Hungary on that, which makes perfect sense as it's your speciality. So let's start with that helicopter view first. How? It's a big question, it's a broad question, but I guess it sets the picture for us. How is Hungary doing on its energy transition?
Thank you for the invitation. I'm honored. It's much nicer to sit on the other side of the table than here, for sure. And I'm pretty much used to Zsófia back here, so sorry for it. but I'm so happy to talk about energy transition in general. The first thing that we mention when we talk about energy transition is it's always decarbonization, and to what extent Hungary would like to reduce its emission. The base year is always 1990. So right now we are at 43% of emission decrease, and we aim at 50% by 2030. So we are quite good at that. The European average is 34%, so we are at 43 already. We intend to have coal phase out. You might know that the Matild power plant, the last power plant running on lignite, represents 5% of the emissions of Hungary, is to be phased out, and we are going to have CCGT gas power plant right in Visonta and a little bit east of the Matra region, Tisza-Palkonya, which can make up for the loss of the lignite-powered electricity production, which is very important as a base load when we talk about intermittent renewables. And then, of course, nuclear expansion. We don't say that we are building a new nuclear power plant. We never say that. We say that this is a sort of expansion of present capacities. Because right now we have 2 gigawatts of nuclear power, and we are going to have 2.4 gigawatts. And for a certain time, they might run together, but it's actually capacity replacement investment. That's very important to say that. Well, we say in the strategies that the second one might run by 2030, but I don't expect it to run before 33. For sure. Carbon capture and storage, that's very important for the hard-to-abate sectors. Let it be steel and cement industry, where the process emission is very high. And, of course, renewable energy. We have a solar boom. I remember back when we introduced the METAR scheme, which is a premium support scheme in 2017, we were a little bit behind. We were a little bit behind Spain, actually. We were behind Romania. I think Romania and Spain were one of the first countries starting this support scheme in Europe. But Hungary was waiting till 2017, and I think it was a very good choice, because the price of renewable energy dropped significantly, and that's when you can have more with less. And that's what we had. At that time, I remember talking to Mavir, which is the transmission utility company, and they said above 2 gigawatts, the system will collapse. That's what they said in 2017. And now we have 8. And it hasn't collapsed yet. Well, it collapsed in other countries in Europe recently. So we know what it means. And that's why we have some problem with the new renewables and maybe wind coming in. But just to have a very short helicopter view, the next topic is energy efficiency. Of course, we would like to make industry economy as energy efficient as possible, to have 740 petajoules of consumption from 800 approximately. And this is something we learned from our French colleagues, because in France, the energy efficiency obligation scheme, and also in Denmark, it's running very well. There are 16 countries in Europe which have an energy efficiency obligation scheme. That's why we introduced it, based on their good example. And basically, we force those companies who sell energy to sell less. This is not something that companies like doing, actually. selling less from which you can make profit, but they have to do it. And right now we are changing the energy efficiency law to even force them to invest in energy efficiency improvements that have a long impact, not only 2 or 3 years, but for 10 years at least. Like invest in houses and energy and efficiency investments in the housing sector. And the last but one is energy security. Of course, this is of prime importance in Hungary, like gas. If we have a look at how much Hungary was consuming before 2009, the economic recession, it was 14 billion cubic meters. And then it dropped to 8. And then after the economic recession, it went back to 12. And now we are at 8 again. So there is a huge space, like 6 billion cubic meters that we can play with if we play well. And of course, we are doing our best with Croatia, the LNG terminal. So there are a lot of diversification tendencies that we are investing in. And of course, we are also strengthening the connections because we still need to strengthen connections. And we are also relying on gas from Azerbaijan, which might come through the southern gas corridor. So this can all help. And of course, reducing gas consumption, that's key. And storage, we, together with Mavir, the transmission company, we invest a lot in storage, especially next to the grid. If you don't have efficient storage system, then we cannot host renewables that are intermittent in nature. And grid development will be part of the future, because without that, we cannot have more renewables, as we could see from the European examples. And last but not least, cross-border interconnections. The aim for the European Union is 15% of cross-border interconnections. We have 48. So we are quite good at being connected with other countries. Now we have to make it smart. And that's what we are working on with Romania, with Slovakia. We have smart grid investments with these two countries to help market with renewables when we need it. So that's a helicopter view.
Thank you very much indeed. That's a lot to pick into from that. Before I do that, Tamas, do you have any reflections at all on any of that? No, you don't have to. It's just...
Not yet. When we get to the gas, maybe.
When we get to the gas, okay. We will get to the gas, I promise you. One of the areas I particularly wanted to talk about was wind. I have a quite unusual interest in wind, which is that my, from an energy point of view, my wife, who is an international lawyer, was involved in the financing for the last wind farm, which was some time ago. And in all the time that I've known you, wind has been off the table. But now it's back on the table. Famously, last year there was a change. So, how long do you think it will be before we see the first new wind farm? Are there any plans out there at the moment?
Well, not soon, for sure. I'll tell you the reason why. It was January 24 that we removed the main legislative barrier, which was like 12 kilometers from any inhabited city, which was basically not allowing any wind farms to be built anywhere in the country. But now it's reduced to less than 1 kilometer, 700 meters, which is a good news. But we also removed the need for competitive tenders, and we also removed a cap on the number of permits that can be received. So 3 things have been removed. So what's next? There is still a big hurdle that we need to face, and that's the surge in solar investments that was causing a saturation of the grid capacity. And that's why there is a new government decree, which is 54 in 2024, the government decree that says the only possible option to have wind energy before 2030 if they can get connected directly to 400 kilovolt grid, and the overall capacity of this project is 670 megawatts. Because right now we have 330 megawatts, and in the new NECP, the new National Energy and Climate Plan, it can be threefold by 2030, which is 1,000. So if this one project is 670 and it's connected directly to high voltage, then it gets the permit before 2029, before 2030. Anything else, small projects can only come after 2030. And of course, wind. Many people say, does the wind blow in Hungary or not? Well, it's 2, 3, and from which direction? But 2, 3, 4 meters per second, and that's the average where the Danube enters Hungary. That's where we have wind projects, most of them, yeah. It's not that much. If you go to Baku, to Azerbaijan, it's 8, 9, 10, constantly. So the flags are not hanging like that, but the flags are, wow, all throughout that, which is good for air pollution in Baku, because there's a lot of air pollution which is swept by the wind, and even they have refineries right in the city in the middle, but you cannot feel it because there's so much wind. But in Hungary, you don't have so much wind. We have some wind on the upper side of Lake Balaton, but who would like to see windmills there? And of course, we have some wind also close to Nyíregyháza, to the close to the eastern border. And honestly, you have wind everywhere above 150 meters. Not as strong as like for offshore wind farms, of course, but we have wind everywhere. And if you have a look at the capacity of the ones we have, the 330, they are 1.5 megawatts each. But now technology allows us to have 5 megawatts for each, triple the capacity. So that's also good news. And if you go to China, you have 20 megawatt capacity. And also the price dropped. If you really have a look at it, it really dropped from $95 per megawatt hours to $55 within 3 years. So I think there is an advantage. That's why Hungary opened. Yes, you can say we could open more than 1,000 megawatts, but there is no grid capacity. So it's moderate target compared to the potential, but the restriction is there.
Quick follow-up, if I may. You said the price had dropped quite a lot within 3 years. What's leading to that drop in price?
Well, it's technology. It's improvement of capacity. So it's technological innovation for sure. But I also heard in China, I heard about 26 megawatts already for one offshore wind. Yeah, 26, which is like 20 times more than what we have in Hungary. This is amazing.
So you can do more with one?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And you have less, because it's actually hazardous waste. So you have to take care of it after 25 years when they have served their lifetime. You have to take care of it, and it's not solved yet how you can, like solar, PV panels are also hazardous waste. And I do remember the first we put a tax on PV panels. They said, why are you taxing solar energy? We are not taxing solar energy. We were taxing hazardous waste, because after 25, 30 years, we have to neutralize them somehow, and and the country is going to take care of that. So this is a minimum price, but we need to tax it. Yeah.
And you mentioned that unless it's a big farm, there will be no licenses before 2030. Are there any efforts to build a big farm?
I think at least 5 megawatts, of course. They are queuing, actually, but none of them have received the permit yet. But the one which is going to receive grid connection, they can start building now and start operating by 29.
And they
are queuing already. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's very interesting, because that leads me on to the next point, which is grid connectivity. I'll give a UK example, and obviously Hungary is very different from the UK. But I know that one of the big problems with connectivity in the UK is that it's becoming a barrier to development. In that you can get, well, if you're lucky, you can get your permissions to build, But because you can't get connected to the grid, that can add 2 years to the project time to get things going. So clearly, and we now have a lot more PV than we had 5 years ago, and that's very variable. So how does the government aim to fix the problem with the grid? Because we have a grid system that was built not for this technology, don't we? So how do you fix it, and when?
So as we see, the bottleneck is, of course, grid connection and the saturation with solar energy, which we call the grid congestion, actually. So there is congestion of the grid, and we, as I said, they are queuing for connections, all our renewable projects. I was talking about this preferential grid access that we have for wind. But what Mavir ZRT, which is the transmission system operator, is doing right now is actually investing 2.1 billion HUF up to 2030 in grid capacity development. And it's basically in high voltage lines, so 220 kilowatt and 400 kilowatt high voltage lines, and storage. We need to have storage of at least 600 megawatts by 26 and 1 gigawatt by 2030. 400 are already underway. So we're waiting for that to be finished, and then we can let renewables in. And we really need to reinforce the backbone grid. And once we reinforce that, then we can open it, especially in the Great Plains. You know, we have the great flat area in the middle of Hungary, which has huge renewable potential. That's where we had to reinforce the grid. And then we also have with Slovakia and Romania a smart grid project, which we are working on right now. One is called with the Dunain grid with Slovakia and Carmen with Romania. I think they're very important for cross-border connection, using artificial intelligence for load forecasting and real-time grid management. I think it will help Hungary a lot, and also these 3 countries for sure. Because if we have a look at, there are 8,700 hours per year, yeah, approximately.
I'll take your...
Yeah, like 365 days, 24 hours each, that's 8,700. There are 2,000 hours from that where there is no wind and no sun. So that's the key. What can you do during those 2,000 hours? And if you know what you do during those 2,000 hours, then nothing like that will happen that happened in Spain and Portugal. And that's the key, always the 2,000 hours when it doesn't blow, the wind doesn't blow, and the sun doesn't shine. And that's, of course, wind and sun are complementary. And if you have biomass, and that's why we also invest in CCGT. We know that this is not the future energy, but it's a sort of bridge energy to have CCGT in Visonta and Tisza-Palkonya to help with base load, so that when 2 base load power plants are out, like what happened in Spain, then we don't have that problem, because that was the problem actually there. And of course, battery storage. And we are also thinking of pumped hydro storage in the Matra power plant in the northern hills, where we can have 500 meters of difference of altitude. And then with nuclear power, which we have a lot, we can pump up water during the night. And when we have peak consumption during the day, then we can let the water run down and we can produce electricity when it's definitely needed. Because the real problem is Sunday, midday, when everybody is cooking the famous Hungarian fish soup. Not fish soup, but meat soup. That's the meat soup.
Húsleves.
Húsleves, if you know where. Húsleves. Between 10 o'clock and 12, everybody is cooking it. And this is a very bad demand-side management. We cannot, of course, change household practices. What we can do is with demand-side management and pricing, actually, we can decrease peak load, the húsleves peak load. It's not only húsleves peak load, but it's during the day. Actually, if we can really push the industry to reduce their peak consumption, that can mean 300 megawatts, and it's huge. And then we can have a much more balanced electricity spread during the day So this is the demand response program. It's still nascent. It hasn't started yet, but we really need to work on that.
And it's officially known as the Húsleves peak
course.
demand, of course.
Yeah.
I love the fact that there are people talking around about peak load and húsleves. And you definitely don't want to interfere with Hungarians' rights to have their húsleves on a Sunday, do you? No, that's very important. Let's talk a little bit about two of the areas that you specialise in: the EU Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package. How are we? How is Hungary doing with those?
There are many packages within the Green Deal. I think, as I said, in terms of emission reductions, we are quite good. In terms of renewable energy, it's soaring. So we have a huge solar boom. We are investing now a lot in geothermal, and now we opened up for wind as well. At the same time, we work on base load, like CCGT, which is also there to make the system more reliable. We need to work in the day-ahead market as well when it comes to market coupling, so that we would not have to sell electricity for negative prices, actually. So this is like electricity in Hungary is within 1 day. It can go up to almost 1,000 euro and go into negative. So this is a huge fluctuation which we should really work on in terms of green transition and Green Deal. And of course, when we are talking about CCGT, is it not a step backwards? It is not becoming more reliant on Russian gas. Yes, it is. But at the same time, we are thinking of having 30% of hydrogen to be able to feed into the system. And also 16,000 tons of hydrogen production per year by 2030. So that's also part of the story. And also biogas production that we would like to increase, which we are working on. We have a new biogas strategy working on. And as long as we have, we can inject biomethane, for example, into the pipeline system, which has to be extremely clean, and that's the problem. And if we can make biogas production, we have to say we have to make it sexy. Unfortunately, it's not something people think about, biogas, but we have to work on it because it exempts us from Russian gas. And there is so much food waste around in Hungary, so much agriculture waste that we cannot use in the agriculture sector, but can be used to turn it into biogas that could also help us a little bit have less Russian gas and more energy security, and decrease our dependence on Russian gas for sure.
Very quickly on that, I mean, how much biogas can be produced? So how much of the Russian gas could be replaced by biogas?
The target is almost 1 billion cubic meters. The target is half for 2030, but we could replace almost 1 billion if we...
Sorry to interrupt. So the target is that half of the Russian gas would be replaced?
I mean, 80% of Hungary's consumption is coming from Russia. So if we talk about like 8 billion, then 6-7 billion, but maybe you know it better, 6-7 billion is coming from Russia. So we are really dependent. But by having 500 million biogas production, we can really reduce that kind of dependency. So that talks a lot about. And of course, solar energy. Right now we are at 8. The target is 12 by 2030, and we are going to reach that. It's like 35% is coming from households. 300,000 houses already have PVs, rooftop PVs. And I think the next step is not only because they cannot have feed-in tariff in the future anymore, but the next step is to have storage. Because can you imagine that like it's responsible like 1.5 gigawatt of electricity need. When the sun stops shining, then this demand is immediately putting a huge burden on the system. So if there is no sort of portfolio management and no aggregation of households, that's the future. We have to aggregate these 300,000 households. They are tiny, small roofs, but once we can aggregate them together with wind, together with biomass, together with biogas, then we can have a much balanced system. So that's also part of the story, of course. And of course, we would like to have a renewable share in the final energy consumption of Hungary of 30%. That's also a target. When we talk about renewables, everybody thinks that it's solar, but no, it's biomass. 70% of heating, renewable heating is coming from biomass, which means people are heating their houses with wood. And unfortunately, that's coupled with burning waste, which is not good for air pollution and so on. But the rest is coming already from solar. Quite a huge portion is coming from solar. And when we talk about 25% of increase in renewable in transport, then we think about at least 4.5% of biogas in transport, but also EV, electronic vehicles. In 2024, 4% of new registrations was already EV. So that's also part of the system, yeah.
That's a slightly different question, and perhaps it's not your specialization, but part of the challenge with EVs is having the charging points for them. If you're not charging in your own home, using your solar panel and a battery, presumably, because you'll be charging overnight. Does that put more pressure on the grid that you have to put charging points out on the street to an already creaking grid system?
It does. That's why wherever we have huge capacity charging system, that's where we do grid development. So it's happening right there, storage capacity development next to charging points. But it's also good to have gas charging and hydrogen charging points next to electricity charging points, because we see the future in hydrogen basically in road transport and also in some industries. But that's why we coupled all the three: grid development, hydrogen, gas, and electricity charging points.
And then with hydrogen, of course, you have the question about whether it's, and I can never remember this, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, or grey hydrogen.
Pink.
Pink hydrogen.
Or yellow. Or brown. Or
it is a rainbow of hydrogen. So how are we on I assume the best hydrogen is green hydrogen. So how are we on green hydrogen?
Well, as I said, the 16,000 tons, that's what we are working on by 2030 in hydrolysis. Now we have brown. If you have a look at the emission trading scheme in Hungary, there are 170 companies. 4 of them are producing hydrogen, but brown hydrogen. Which means they use gas to produce hydrogen. It's needed in chemical industry everywhere. But we have to make it green, of course, or blue if we capture from gas the CO2 emissions, or we can also have pink and yellow, so nuclear is also there. But basically, the direction is towards green hydrogen. Yeah.
Twice now you've mentioned carbon capture, and obviously that's really important. And I believe that MOL has been doing some work on that. Where are we with the technology? Is carbon capture possible today, or is it possible tomorrow? And if it's tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, when is that going to come in at scale that makes a difference?
As long as it's 10 times the price, it's not coming tomorrow. But we really need it. I mean, in steel production, cement production, ceramics production, glass production, the CO2 emission is coming 40% only from energy use. 60% is coming from process. When we are producing clinker, the process itself emits CO2. And this is where technology does not exist yet. There is some green steel technology, of course, available, but of the price that is actually affordable for companies. But I think there are already some good investments happening both in Matild power plant and in Page region, where we have cement production together with some petrochemical companies who have reservoirs to store actually CO2.
Which of course is important. What's the trigger for the cost? Or rather, how can you, is there anything, does it require simply the government to say, okay, we're gonna lower the cost by absorbing it somehow, or does it require more funding from the EU? How do you get the cost down?
So all these companies which have a problem with process emissions belong to the European Emission Trading Scheme. So they get a lot of free allowances. So it means that the free allowances, they don't need to meet all their emissions because half of that is coming free from the EU. But the ratio of free allowances decreases by year. And by 2040, they will be totally phased out. So these companies have like 15 years left to actually invest in CCES and CCUS to be able to make up for the lost free allowances. Free allowances are there for the hard-to-abate sectors because we are so afraid of carbon leakage. Don't be afraid, carbon is not leaking anywhere. But carbon leakage means that these companies might go to Turkey, might go to even Ukraine previously, because they don't have the same system like we have in Europe, like emission trading scheme. So, and we are at the edge of the European Union. It's so easy for companies to go over to the Western Balkan countries or to any other countries where there is no emission trading scheme yet, and they have less burden.
Okay. Talking of burdens, in the last 2 years, I guess, if you include the run-up to the presidential election, we learned that President Trump has one favourite word, and all we hear about nowadays is whether tariffs are on or off, and sometimes that changes within hours. But what I'm wondering is whether there is any unintentional incentive wrapped up in there. So is there any benefit for Hungary on an energy point of view out of tariffs?
It's a very interesting question. I think it's an unintended incentive for all countries to become energy independent. I mean, for the last 30 years, geopolitically, we were living in a free trade world, and now it's over. So those countries who are stepping ahead in energy transition and actually in electrification will do good. And what do I mean by electrification? When electrification is when there are many electrically powered alternatives compared to those appliances and those industries which can run only on fossil fuels. So how petrostates can turn into electrostates, that's the key. And China is doing that. 30% of its overall energy consumption is electricity. Look at the US, it's 20%. Look at the EU, it's 20%. They are taking the lead. And there is another field where they are taking the lead, and this is minerals. 90% of minerals are already in the hands of China. And you can see, like, the US is now negotiating with China because of that. Because US industries, American industries, will not get any minerals if they have that trade war. So this is the key. And when a country's energy system suffers from backwardness, then they cannot become independent. So what do we need? We need innovation, we need technological improvement, we need to have battery system improvements, storage improvement, and immense electrification. And electrification is happening in road transport, it's happening in household heating and cooling appliances, it's happening in the field of artificial intelligence. Look at the 3 big US companies, like Microsoft investing in 3 Mile Islands, Google investing in offshore wind, and Amazon is also, Google is investing in SMRs, and Amazon is investing in offshore wind. So So right now we see an immense tendency of electrification, but the problem many countries can do, and I think Hungary would like to do it in a different way, that it's not enough to decarbonize the energy system. If we don't invest in high voltage systems, if we don't change the infrastructure like what China does with the ultra-speed train systems that we have in China everywhere. And if we don't change the demand side of it, then we will not arrive there. So the key is decarbonization is not enough. We need to invest in high voltage system and electrification. And look at those countries where the price of electricity is high. They will not arrive. Only those countries will arrive, and I think Hungary is good at that, where the price of electricity is low. It's simple economics. When it's low, the price is low, you consume more. And when you consume more, you invest more in this system. And of course, Hungary sees, as you know, the FDI is really high in Hungary. We expect 55% of electricity demand increase by 2030, which is huge. What we say in our strategies and plans, any increase in electricity consumption can only come from renewables. So we want to keep our energy efficiency targets. The additional increase in electricity demand should and will come from renewables, but we are really working on electrification. And of course, I think energy transition is much about managing risks as about seizing opportunities, but it also transforms risks. So energy transition is transforming risks, and that's what we have to live with. And maybe a last word that green will not be cheaper, but brown will be more expensive in the future. So this is where we are at, and that's why I really think that tariffs are really going to push a lot of countries to become independent and on the way on this bumpy road of energy transition.
Bumpy indeed, and we'll come to that. Tamás, we will dig into the economic stuff, I promise. But I wanted to use something as a bridge from Barbara's area to yours, and to talk about that vexed issue of finding alternatives to Russian gas and the possibility of an EU-wide ban. Now, clearly, you do not sit here speaking for the European Commission or indeed the Hungarian government, but what's your sense of where we are heading? Do you think the Commission is going to try and push for that ban? If they push for that ban, will Hungary impose its veto? And if they talk a lot about money, obviously, and I think the figure that I read most recently was that were Hungary to have to give up its Russian gas, it would be something like between 600 and 800 billion huf more, or 2 billion euro annually on top of the energy bills. So what's your, and none of us want to have to pay that, obviously. So what's your sense of where we're going with the EU and energy and Russian gas?
Thank you very much for the question, and I'd like to say hello to everyone as well. So before I go and try to answer that question and reveal my views, which are views of a private person, of course. So
naturally,
I'm not speaking to on behalf of anybody here. Let me just add one thing to Barbara's point, and I believe that this is important. So tariffs are a tool, I think, in the U.S. hands, right? With which Trump would like to get a much better position for the U.S. But I don't think that it is a plan to keep them for a long term. Nevertheless, I 100% agree that energy efficiency and energy freedom, if you like, or self-sustainability is key for everybody. but I think mostly this is because of the geopolitical developments, right? And tariffs are helping that, and it's a negotiation tool in my view in the first place. And I don't want to get into the U.S. debt situation, which is opening up doors that are really hard to close. But the U.S. clearly needs to get better from this perspective, and this is a tool that Trump and many others, Scott Bessent, believes that these are efficient ways to do that. Many others contradict that, but self-sufficient energy systems, this is an imperative to everybody, and this is also true for diversification of supply chains. So very, very similar pattern, and everybody needs to get better in this. So, of course, for Hungary, it would be very good to be independent of Russian gas, but it's impossible. Yeah. So, how could a tiny country like Hungary, with an open economy, get independent from a source of gas that is producing definitely significantly more than 50%, maybe 80%, Barbara said, purchased from Russia for a good price? Yeah. So this is important, because what the EU is really struggling with is the energy price. So the competitiveness, and if you look at the Draghi report, if you look at the recent analysis of the competitiveness of the EU, energy is definitely a number one topic there. And until the US is producing for 1/3, or look at China and what they have reached, I don't think that it is realistic to say completely goodbye to Russian energy. And of course, the countries within our neighborhood are having a very similar view, as far as I could read, and sometimes between the lines as well, because politics is really influencing that a lot. You know, how do you stand to the war, and what are your targets and what are your fears? But even within Western Europe, France, Belgium already expressed views that maybe it's not such a good idea to cut Russian gas completely, or Russian energy. So this is something that I don't believe is played out yet. So I think whoever is believing that this is going to happen just from one day to the other, I don't think that this is the case. Of course, I have no idea what's going to be the end game, because politics is going to influence that clearly. But if that would be the case, this would be a very significant cost increase for Hungary, and very bad for the Hungarian economy, for sure. So no one can really come with a viable alternative to substitute Russian gas. As simple as that. So, and I don't know whether anybody has any magic tools, weapons here to overcome that problem, but this is my view, at least.
Okay, let's start to dig into the economic detail then. The Q1 GDP figures weren't just disappointing; they were the worst in the European Union, and I think the obvious concern wrapped up in that is, what does that mean for this year? The government's official projection was already lowered to 2.5% for the year in April, and the 2025 budget was predicated on growth of 3.4%. So, you know, I'm not great at maths, but I can see a problem there.
Me too.
So do we think that the government's figures simply aren't credible now, or what is going to have to happen? How is this going to play out? How are we going to fix that gap?
That's a tough one. Tough one for everybody. So I think the GDP figure for the first quarter was indeed disappointing, and nobody was calculating with that. We have seen the details that the Hungarian Statistical Office came out. It's not just the usual suspects, automotive, which is clearly in a difficult situation, but even services who performed very well so far are down in the first quarter, and not helping as much as the government was believing, and consumption is not speeding up either. So I think by now it is very difficult to say that even the modified projections can be reached for this calendar year. I think that. Well, so I'm not sure who was expecting that. Just to give you one data point coming out of our CEO survey, the CEOs, the 250 CEOs we asked, said that the GDP growth in 25 is going to be 1.8%, right? Today, the 1.8% seems optimistic, I have to say.
Heroic,
but closer than any other projections from December 2024. This is when we asked the CEOs about their views, and there was another very interesting element that the CEOs, 60% of the CEOs said that the economic development is going to be faster, right? So we're going to have growth. But when we asked, what about your business? They only said 39% said that I'm going to accelerate growth, which was always the other way around. So always people believe that the economy is going to do somehow, but my company is going to do great. This time around, it was the opposite. So my company is not going to do that great, but the economy is not going to do great. And this just did not happen, right? So when we believe that the companies will not develop as much, this is clearly a sign for the economy that it's not going to be as good. Now, why is that? Is that something that is very Hungarian? Yeah, not that much, right? So I think we all see when we operate our companies that the export markets, especially if they are in the European Union, are struggling as well. Germany is in a difficult situation very clearly. The German economy is stagnating for a couple of years now, and this is something that an open economy like the Hungarian economy is really feeling. And when we see big German companies closing down some production activities and laying off some people, this is never good news for the Hungarian economy. By the way, not just the Hungarian economy, so it's the Polish economy, the Slovakian economy, the Czech economy. Some economies are even more, let's say, concerned because of a higher share of automotive in their industry, like Slovakia, for example. But they are all suffering. There are a couple of other elements for Hungary because of which we have it even more difficult, like the EU money that is not coming to the country, and let's again face it. The chances of getting all the money are getting less and less. So I believe that this is what the businesses are also feeling, and in that environment, what's not happening? Investment is not happening. Yeah, so people simply don't trust the future, and they believe, God knows what's going to happen. This is so many uncertainties that we see in Hungary, we see in the world. I should be, pull back a bit, be reserved, really invest if it's a must, which is a bad spiral. So this is the direction, and no one should go. And this has all many sides, like what we are seeing with the demographics, that we have difficulties. Not just Hungary has difficulties, but the other countries, the neighboring countries, have difficulties as well, because of the problems that are pushing the people, and these are natural persons as well as business leaders, and it's really difficult to be optimistic in these days. But I would definitely say that who should be optimistic if not the leaders of companies, right? So I hope that everybody is optimistic in this room. Very good, Bea. Thank you very much. At least one person is definitely optimistic. I believe that there are so many things we can do in our companies to make things better. For example, digitalization, and this is something that probably the representatives sitting here are doing great from this perspective. What about the small and medium-sized enterprises in Hungary? And the government is pushing it. Demjan Sándor program, many other programs that are available there. But if you are not in the mood of investing in AI, and what is AI doing, and how can I control whether it's GDPR compliant, whether my data is going to be out in the internet next day, it's easy to get into the spiral again. But some good news as well: the Hungarian CEOs trust AI much more than any other country. Wow. In the region. 35% of the CEOs in Hungary are very open to AI, and many are experimenting with that. So overall, what I wanted to say, it doesn't look very, very promising. The GDP growth doesn't look very promising, although there is one aspect that we could mention. Big investments, Barbara also referred to that, came into the country. CATL, BMW, BYD, unprecedented volume of investments, billions of euros that make the other OEMs' investments small compared to what we see now. The big question is, when do those companies really start production? Because it seems that their speed of investment is just a little bit moderated, let's put it this way. So the uncertainties, again, coming from the German market, that electric cars, after the closing down of the subsidy scheme, are not that popular. Now we see an uptick again in electric car sales in Western Europe generally, and everybody in the industry believes that this is a temporary halt, even though the investments are ongoing, and if there will be some production start, which for BMW definitely there will be, as far as we can see after the summer. I think that this may do good to the Hungarian GDP growth as well, and there are many side investments, many suppliers coming as well, and once these investments will turn to full production, they will be also operational as well. So this is something what we can trust.
Really unfair question, but then you kind of expect that from me. Do you have, or does PwC have any rule of thumb for what your expectation for GDP is? So what is a realistic expectation for GDP for this year, given all of this uncertainty?
No, is the answer. But I think I certainly still believe that it's going to be over 1%. Yeah, so that I still believe that we need stronger quarters, clearly, but I believe that that there is still a chance to go above 1% GDP growth.
Presumably, some of that is when when BMW actually starts pushing out its vehicles.
Yes.
BYD is not going to be far behind them, I guess.
If that wouldn't happen, I would question the 1%.
Okay, all right. So it all relies on BMW. No pressure then. We'll have a national general election next year, and if history has taught us anything in terms of Hungary, doesn't matter who is in the government, spending will go up in the run up to that, and it's kind of almost expected. When I'm talking with my Hungarian family, they're already speculating as to what's going to come. So I guess I have two questions around that. What do you think we should be looking out for in terms of pre-election? There isn't a polite word for that, is there? In terms of pre-election spending, what should we be looking for? And where's the money going to come from?
I have really no idea, Robin, where the money is going
to... Expect a Robin Hood tax.
Come from. I think that what we can see is that governments around the region are getting more and more creative. Yeah? There are many new tax types that we see. Let me just give you an example of that. In Romania, there is a tax called ICAS, and they are trying to tax oil and gas transactions which are not happening in Romania, but everybody who is selling towards Romania or having some kind of relation with respect to Romania, so they are not even tax registered there, this tax should be paid for the Romanian budget. The Romanian budget is in a difficult situation. So Hungary did not go that far with the special taxes that we see, but you see many things in Hungary as well. I think that just whenever there is election, it doesn't matter which country in the world, you see spending increasing. So I don't think this is going to be different this time, and how and what is going to happen is difficult to see. Yeah, but something is going to happen for sure.
Something is going to happen for sure. Those are words we can live by. We've kind of touched on this already, but I wanted to dig down just a little bit deeper with you, because I can remember you saying maybe 4 or 5 years ago at one of the CEO surveys that more and more was being expected of CEOs, and that they were having to tackle, to wrestle with bigger problems than ever. And it seems to me that just doing business in this modern economy is really hard. If you're having to deal with Trump tariffs, and whether they're on this week or not, I mean, even if you're, again, I'm going to have to use a UK example, and forgive me for that, because it is different, I know. But if we look at aluminium, which Trump decided at a rally he was going to announce that it's going up from 25 to 50%. The UK has a deal with the US, although that deal isn't finalized and signed yet. And so they don't actually know, they've had some assurances, but they don't actually know whether they're going to be paying 0% on aluminium from the UK or 50%. And that's a huge field to have to sort of factor into your communications. So how are businesses coping with this environment?
We never had so many questions on tariff and origin planning compared to previous times than we have today. So if you know where you would like to sell, there are opportunities around how you plan your sourcing, how you plan the transformation of the raw materials that you are buying, and whether you can have a qualifying origin status that is good from an end market point of view. So a lot more planning is happening there. But you are absolutely right. It's much more challenging to be a CEO today than it was in the last couple of years, because so many uncertainties are there you have to calculate with. That not to speak about the speed of digitalization, and every company is in that cycle of whether it's your ERP system, whether it's cloud transformation, whether it's just automation that you want to do in production or in the office. I think those are very, very important points for all the CEOs to do. And you know, sometimes the target is moved very, very quickly, and you have to make bold decisions. So what do you think? Do you think that tariffs gonna stay, or you are convinced that this is a temporary thing and you can invest looking over that temporary period and trying to guess what's gonna happen after that? So is the tariffs good for anyone in the economy in any country? The answer is no. So even if the tariff is going to be paid in the US, who is going to pay it finally? Potentially the US customer, right? Is this good for anybody? Is this good for the US administration? Probably no. So is it realistic to have high tariffs staying? Probably not. Is this an effective tool to relocate production to the US? To some extent, definitely yes. So is this competitive? A big question. What is China going to do in the meantime? So there are so many, and how is the US debt refinanced, which is the ultimate question in my view. And if they are getting it right and the dust gonna settle, tariffs gonna go.
At which point we all say amen. I'd like to open it up to some questions to the floor, but just before we do that, you mentioned the EU funds. Do you have any sense as to where we are with that? Should we just assume that we've lost the frozen bits that weren't unfrozen? And is there the potential that there's going to be more of this withholding of funding?
Again, it's very hard to predict the future, but so what we saw in Poland, that there was a government change, and the EU money started flowing right away. So I think it depends on the outcome of the elections as well. If there is little or no change, it is difficult to see a change in the EU's willingness to open up those channels. but it's difficult to see, the whole development within the European Union. So I think there are so many political questions that are poorly measured within the European Union. What do the voters want? Again, who would like to know? There are some people who already know that this is going to happen for sure, but no one knows what's going to happen. So I believe that what we need to work for is to try to get these subsidies that should be a right for Hungary. Unfortunately, it's not happening right now.
Okay, we have two great brains here, ladies and gentlemen. So, is there anyone who has a question that they would like to? Bea, hang on one second. Let me get to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. So Barbara, Tamás, you both touched on the importance of grid development and investing in energy infrastructure at large. So what are some of the optimistic scenarios that you see ahead of us, both in terms of Hungary investing more, but also at the EU level, both investments and regulations helping it to be a bit more smooth and seamless?
Barbara, do you want to go first?
After what happened in Spain and Portugal, now Brussels is very loud with voices from the connectedness of the peninsula, Iberian Peninsula. It's not connected totally to the European grid. And it has always been a bottleneck when we have a look at the whole European grid. We really need to connect the peninsula because it also caused disturbances in southern France. So that's one of the key things. The second one is that competitiveness came into the fore, and we have the omnibus regulation. And if you have a look at the omnibus regulation, we talk a lot about how we can ease red tape, how we can speed up the giving of permits to renewable projects. In Hungary, it's quite a short time, actually. But in Europe, it can take 1.5 years or 2 years at least before somebody gets a permit. So this is all about, and also pricing, connecting prices. Let me just talk about what happened in Baku at COP29, because Azerbaijan announced that they are going to connect with their grid system with the European grid under the Black Sea and Georgia. And then you say, why do you want to connect Azerbaijan with the European grid? Because they are going to sell us green, renewable electricity produced by renewable energy. And then how it will come, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to use Azeri electricity in Hungary for sure. But once all these grids are connected in the cloud, I can trade with it. And that's the key. In the cloud, I'm not going to use Azeri electricity, but I'm because of connectedness, production and the supply in the whole region will be connected. And in terms of trade, it will be much easier to get electricity from all over this region. So I think from geopolitical point of view, connectedness and connectedness of infrastructure, let it be energy infrastructure, road infrastructure, is key to ease tension between the countries, but also to have cheaper energy.
I'm a great believer of CCGT. I believe that we need those small power plants to level and balance out the periods where there are peaks and the periods where there is no sunshine and no wind blowing. I think you could clearly see the direction from Trump. In China, this was never a top priority. Like sustainability, yes, indeed, there are in Shenzhen only electric taxis, and electric vehicles is something that China was investing a lot in. But why? Because they had no chance with the traditional combustion engines. Yeah, so they couldn't even get close to the German knowledge that they had in that. So they said, let's focus on this EV market and let's try to be the best there. And that's where they are. And they are pushing now their vehicles to the European market. So I believe that the grid development is probably the number one task. The connectedness and the grid development that is there ahead of Hungary, and this is true for the European Union as well.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. As I understand, one of the possible solutions for managing different types of peaks is a community-level, peer-to-peer energy sharing, like households, panels on the households sending to the school electricity during weekdays, and on the weekday, the panel on the school sending back electricity to the households. Are there any plans in Hungary to move into this direction?
This is the energy community that directive that we are working on, and we were also easing the regulation for that. So now there are 11 energy communities already established in Hungary. If you go on the web page of the Energy Office, MEC, you can see those communities. Some of them are small villages, some of them are schools together with some community buildings, and they work. They ease the tension, the pressure on the grid, and I think that's the future. And till 2030, energy communities will be also supported by the EU.
Anybody else? No more questions from the floor? Last chance. Don't worry, I've still got questions. Okay. I'd really be interested in your take on this, Tamás. We hear that Bulgaria is likely to join the euro soon, soon-ish. It still has to be, as far as I understand, it still has to be accepted by the other eurozone members. And if that's then accepted, then it's something like a year hence. So we're probably talking about the end of next year. Does the fact that Bulgaria joins the euro put more pressure on Hungary to go in the same direction? I know that you've been quite firm in saying in the past that the euro is not good for Hungary today, but does this sort of ratchet up that pressure?
Let me just double check what the CEO said about the euro. They said that 2034 we will introduce the euro. I think that it does, Robin. So I think the more countries introduce the euro, the more difficult it's going to be for any Hungarian government to keep out of the eurozone. Obviously, this is something that is quite popular when it comes to the voters, right? So what it does, it makes the payment system more stable in the country. Devaluation of the local currency is not happening if you are officially having euros. On the other hand, you lose the room for maneuvering, which no government likes. We had a prediction as well on the Hungarian forint euro exchange rate, which was, I think, 415 for this year. We see clearly that we are below that CEO prediction, but we see this constant devaluation of the Hungarian forint, which is good for the national bank right now. But what I think is easy to see on the Hungarian market, that more and more transactions are happening in euro denomination. Yeah, so even if there are two Hungarian companies, like in the real estate sector, they are agreeing in euros, and even if the payment is not happening in euros, sometimes even the payment is happening in euros. We are getting more and more euro determined. So I think we are moving to this direction. When is a big question, but I believe what is the most important question for Hungary is we should join the euro at the time where the Hungarian economy is very strong. That's a key. When we are in good shape, really pumped up to a strong level compared to other European countries. I'm not saying Germany or Austria, because that's very difficult, but at least get closer.
Do you think the prediction of the CEOs is a good one then? 30, was it 34 or 36?
34. The issue with those predictions is it's getting always a little bit further away, because the CEOs also see, probably, at least some of them, that we are not ready yet. But I think if your question, Robin, is whether Hungary and the Hungary economy could be ready, I can imagine a scenario where we would have peace in the neighborhood, which would be very good for energy price, which would be very good for the economy. It would be very good for the attitude, which is important from business perspective, from societal perspective. That in that case, absolutely yes. But if we have an ongoing war for years, it's not.
Okay, understood. Last chance, ladies and gentlemen. Does anyone have a last question they'd like to ask? Because if not, I'm going to wrap things up. Nothing? Nobody? Very good. So what did we learn today? A lot. I think the phrase that I'm going to take with me is green will not be cheaper, but brown will be more expensive. We're in a world where connectivity is important anyway, but it's going to become crucial. And we're in a world where we need to find ways to bring prices down, and connectivity can help with that. We're in a world where we need to be wary of, no, not wary, we need to be aware of China and what China is doing, whether it's on electrification or on minerals, or on many other things. We're in a world where innovation and tech is necessary, but the good news is that we're in a world where you guys, the CEOs, can lead and make a difference. And I think we'll just leave it at that. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to thank our two speakers today, Ambassador Barbara Wasson and Tamás Lőcsé. Thank you.